Welcome to Stitch and Witch podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Megan Black. My brain just froze on your last name for a second. I was like, Megan Black, who's here to talk to us about all things crafty and witchy. Megan, I came across Megan, I think it was through a Twitter thread that somebody was talking about witchy YouTubers. And love everything that she's doing. And we're going to talk about so many different aspects of crafting, from witchcraft to bullet journaling to crochet to all kinds of stuff. So welcome to the show, Megan.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And you are the one that inspired me to start bullet journaling. So
that's so exciting. I love it. I've been looking around YouTube for witchy bullet journalers, and I know that they're out there, but I feel like I have a hard time finding engaging witchy bullet journalers. A lot of them are like really interesting, but I, as you can tell, speak very quickly. And some of these YouTube channels, I'm like, everything you're saying is amazing, but I need it at like 1.5 speed or I can't keep up because I get distracted. But you got into bullet journaling recently and you had a video and it was great fun and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for joining that portion of YouTube.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been a journey. Definitely been a journey.
So what we do on the show is we talk about craft and craft. So we talk about witchcraft or your spiritual craft and your physical craft or your artsy craft. I want to start with your artsy crafts and all of the various things. And you're like me, you do a lot of them. Let's talk about all the different crafts that you do and how you kind of found yourself to that portion of the world.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So I've always been a crafty kind of person, but not necessarily artistic, if that makes any sense at all. Like I can craft and create. I cannot draw, like to save my life. I have done, when I was a young teen, we used to do these like digital doll drawings where you draw like their clothes and it was like pixel art or whatever. And I think that was sort of my introduction to being more crafty. But the main thing that I do is crochet. My grandma actually taught me how to crochet when I was about 9 years old, I want to say, is when we first started. And I think the first thing I started with was a granny square Christmas stocking, like a mini one. It can't have been more than like 3 inches big. It was so small. But it just kind of took off from there. I've picked it up and put it down over the course of my life. You know, nobody wants to be a crocheting grandma, quote unquote, when they're 13, right? Right. So that is my main sort of craft. I can kind of knit, almost. It might not look like knitting, but I have like the general idea of how to do it. I prefer not to because crochet is much easier for me. I can embroider. I enjoy embroidery when I need a break from crochet, and I prefer to do embroidery as more of an offering rather than creating something to use. And I actually learned how to embroider when I was a teenager in something called Job's Daughters, which is hilarious. It's like because I know people will ask that don't know what it is. It's a girls group that is kind of underneath the parent of the Masonic temple.
Oh.
And the Freemasons, and you have to be related to a Freemason in order to join Job's Daughters. And all of the teachings and the rituals are based on the teachings of Job from the Bible. And I always joke that if you're more occult or spiritually inclined, Job's Daughters is like the pipeline to being a witch. Because they have like, there's ritual, there's music, there's very specific ceremonial steps that have to be taken sometimes. But anyway, they teach things like embroidery, and There's a lot of community service aspects to it. But that's where I learned how to do embroidery, in a group about God.
That's awesome. I actually I talk a lot with people about like their kind of introduction to spirituality, and I feel like so often that comes from somewhere like that too. Like they started, I honestly, like, I had just gotten into, or had just been introduced to, a Silver Ravenwolf book, and it was like a month after I started reading it that I went to the first Catholic funeral I ever attended. And I was sitting in that church going, this is the most pagan thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And that was like my introduction.
Is something else.
Yeah. And because I was raised Baptist, fundamentalist Christian, and I was looking at this funeral full of incense and this guy in Latin, like waving around this metal thing. I was like, what? This is some witchy stuff here. Like, this is, what is going on? I thought I was at like a Christian thing. Where am I?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a call and response.
Yeah.
I've been to Catholic mass, I think, twice. I went with a friend of mine when I was in high school, and she's Catholic. And I went because of the experience. I was like, this would be something interesting. I've never been before. I'm open-minded, of course. So why not? And I went. I can't say that I would go back, but that's like based on my own beliefs and nothing really against the I lost words. Anyway, I was introduced to Wicca first through, I think it was a Scott Cunningham book.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine pulled me aside and she's like, look what I found. Look at this thing. We were like 12. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This is great. I love it immediately. And it's been a ride since then.
That was going to be my next question. You answered it before I even asked it, how you got into that. So do you identify as Wiccan or?
Not anymore. So that's where I started, was neo-Wicca. I've never been formally initiated into a coven or a tradition, but I am more now, I say Celtic pagan with an Irish focus, and an eclectic witch. And that's sort of a path that developed organically.
So you mentioned earlier embroidery and as an offering. Tell me more about how those things work together for you.
So it's a sacrifice of time, and sometimes with embroidery, blood.
So valid.
I don't know how many times I've stabbed myself with my own needle. But yeah, so the most recent thing that I have made for embroidery was actually an embroidered Bridget's cross that sits on my wall above my altar for Bridget. And it's the sacrifice of the time and doing the act as a devotion, taking the time to just sit and focus on the embroidery at the same time as, saying prayers or vocally, what am I trying to say? Like vocally telling Bridget, okay, this is what I'm doing for you. This is going to be a finished piece that I consecrate for you on my altar space. And, it's a gift for the gods, basically.
That's awesome. I feel like I identify primarily as a kitchen witch because not intentionally. I just realized one day that the only time I ever did magic, it was in my kitchen. So I guess that's what I am. I for a long time I had an altar. I mean, I have a little altar in this room, but my studio, but for a long time I had an altar in my bedroom, and then I had one in my living room, and I never looked at them. And I'd end up taking what I needed to the kitchen with me. And I was like, why doesn't my altar just live in the kitchen?
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, one of the biggest things was learning how much of magic was part of my natural life. Like, I was making breakfast, and cooking breakfast involved witchcraft in a way. Like, that's how Kitchen Witch kind of came together. And I feel like you're saying something similar, like you're crafting for the gods, but it's something that historically women would have done anyway, or people would have done anyway, right? And exactly. I love that kind of way that we connect those things together.
exactly. Yeah. And it's like most of my crafting is like that, unless I'm making stuff to go into my shop, because I feel like it wouldn't be right for me to create like a shawl and fill it with magic for something without the person's permission that's going to wear it.
Right.
I do incorporate general overall blessings of happiness and like good health, but in a way that's not overpowering, I guess. I don't feel like that's the right word, but sort of like just general blessings with whatever I make that goes in my shop. But yeah, a lot of my original crafting, once I got onto a pagan path, is the dedication and the mindfulness specifically for the gods or for witchcraft purposes. I can't say I do too much in the kitchen. I make a mean cup of coffee, but I do all
you do a lot of videos of like really cute spell work. I say cute. I feel like cute's not quite the right word, but it's very like it's crafty spell work is the only way I can think to say it. And I love those videos. They're very aesthetic and they're very entertaining.
Oh, thank you. That's
talk about, so you're saying that you put in blessings. I'm curious, I guess, without like, I don't want to invade your spiritual practice, but I'm curious what that looks like on a practical sense. Like, do you, I mean, I craft while I watch YouTube, but are you like specifically focused on that? You have a daughter, right? So how much of this involves like your household, and or is this time that you set aside specifically for that, that's like, this is mommy's meditation time, or how do you work that?
So usually the blessings go in after I'm completely done with it, because unless it's for something completely witchcraft or spiritually related, like I made a bandana to wear as a veil sometimes, that was time completely set aside where I needed to be by myself as I worked on it, so that I could focus on the purpose of what I was making. But yeah, no, I have like 4 skeins of yarn sitting on my desk in front of my computer, and I will make stuff and watch YouTube, or make stuff while I'm passively playing The Sims, or, you know, just doing whatever. Because yeah, I am a mom. I am the primary caretaker of the household. So I do all of the cooking and the cleaning and whatnot. I have like a million pets. I've got 3 snakes, a leopard gecko, 2 ferrets, a cat, and a dog. So
you're exactly where I was like 10 years ago. Now I have cats and dogs and a turtle. But I used to have leopard geckos and bearded dragons and a couple of snakes. And
yeah. So on a practical sense, anything that has like general blessings, that happens afterwards. When it's done and I'm packing it away, that's when I will say, okay, you know, to the wearer that gets this, or I'll hold it in my hands and just focus on like white light and bright energy, and then put it away.
Yep, that's really cool. How old is your daughter?
She'll be 9 next month.
9. I thought she was like, so is she crafty too?
Yes, but not in the same way. So I think she's really obsessed with really long fingernails right now. And she would die for getting like acrylic nails right now, but she's way too young. So instead, what she's been doing is she has taken like a plastic soda bottle and cut it up into pieces so that it's like really long nails, and like would tape it to her finger, and she's walking around like with these big old plastic pieces on her fingers.
I love kids. They come up with the most creative
right
things.
And she really is into drawing and anime, and she has clay. So it's like all of the things that she's crafty at, I have 0 experience with. And I've tried to teach her how to crochet, but she's 100% not interested in it. So I'm like, well, maybe we can learn how to do what you're doing together, because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right. That's so funny. Yeah, I grew up in a very crafty, like my parents are very crafty. My grandmother's really crafty. I grew up in a house full of, like, actually the hot glue gun that I use, I stole from my parents when I turned 18 and moved out of their house.
That's so
like it's all come from their place. And there was always a new craft to learn or a new supply around that I could experiment with. So I kind of used everything, including like soda bottles or, paper towels. I wanted to make corn husk dolls one year, but it was way off season. So I started experimenting with like scraps of tissue paper, scraps of paper towels, and I started making like paper corn husk dolls, I guess is what I was making. But yeah, kids are funny like that. I was probably about her age too when I did that. Kids are funny like that. They just kind of they're so creative and they find the thing around them and use it.
Oh yeah, she has taken balloons and cut them up in certain ways and put them on her Barbie dolls to make like bathing suits. Like, kid, I never would have thought to do something like that when I was your age, because I just wasn't like that. I didn't grow up in a crafting household. My mom isn't very crafty. My dad's a truck driver, so he was hardly ever home when I was a kid. And my brother and sister just weren't. So I learned most of what I know from my grandma. And then later on, when I was more involved in some other things like the embroidery, I picked that up. And sewing a little bit, not too great at that, but I have a pretty awesome sewing machine that is a great closet decoration.
Mine is sitting on the floor behind me here. And my goal of 2021 was to make myself a pair of palazzo pants. And the fabric that I chose is sitting right there, and the sewing machine is sitting right there. And the two have never met. that clearly did not happen in 2021. Maybe 2022 I'll make my palazzo pants.
Maybe.
Maybe. I even like, they're the easiest. When I actually sit down, I've been sewing since I was probably 4 or 5. When I actually sit down to make the palazzo pants, it will probably take me 2 hours. I just, in an entire year, could not find 2 hours apparently to sit down and make this pair of pants.
It was a year. It's been a year for like the last 2 years. It's just been a year.
Yeah. It really has. What brought you to bring your crafting and your spirituality to YouTube and podcasting, and you're on Discord, and what brought you to kind of build up that community that you've got there?
So originally the podcast was because I couldn't find a good Wiccan based podcast that wasn't dead when I started my podcast. I just couldn't find one. So I was like, well, screw it. I can't find one. I'm going to start my own. And then it just evolved organically from there, because I was Wiccan when I started and now I'm no longer Wiccan. And then I was like, well, I have a podcast, but it would be really cool to be on YouTube. I can reach more people that way. And at the same time, develop more creative skills at it, because YouTube is a very visual platform. So it has been a learning curve to edit my videos and make them aesthetically pleasing and learn what the heck B-roll was, because I didn't know what B-roll was. I was just going to sit in front of a camera and talk. But sometimes I still do that because it's just easier. And I feel like now I incorporate more of the crafting side of my practice, because I don't personally see a lot of that on YouTube. I see a lot of it separate. Like there is a whole host of channels dedicated to crochet and patterns and learning how to crochet. And then there's a whole host of channels dedicated to witchcraft and the practical aspects of it, as well as different like ethical dilemmas and talking points. But in order for me to be on YouTube and be online and be authentic to myself, I have to bring them both together, because it's part of my practice. Like the healing bag that I made before I had surgery last June, that's exactly what I did for myself. So it wouldn't have been authentic of me, I guess, to create a healing spell to put on YouTube that didn't have the same aspects that I would use myself. And for making the little pouch, it's what I would do. I sat there and I made it, and Yeah.
I love that. Your name actually came up the other day. I was having a conversation with a couple of friends, and then later on with a different friend. I kind of was having this conversation with a few different people, I guess, over the course of a day. And in one of those conversations, I can't remember which one, your name came up, because we were talking about how I was trying to watch this bullet journaling video, and it was fine, but she kept on bringing her Christianity into the bullet journaling that she was building, or the bullet journaling spread she was building, which is great. But I got thinking about it, and I was like, I just like jammed my knee off the table. That's going to sound great on a podcast. But I was thinking about it, and I was like, Christians don't hesitate to assume that everyone around them is okay with them being Christian and to bring it into their everyday thing. Like, you can watch a video about how to make crepes. I just made one about how to make crepes, so that's my topic. But you can watch a video about how to make crepes, and there's going to be like an applique hanging on the wall behind them with a Bible verse on it, or they're gonna like show a quick clip of themselves, a little B-roll of them praying before they sit down to actually eat the crepes, something like that, right? And I feel like there is a market, or there is a viewership out there that you and I are kind of on the same path toward, which I love, because the more the merrier. But where it's like, we're doing the things we normally do and also witchcraft, right? Like, I'm making crepes, and also my salt and pepper shakers happen to be shaped like cauldrons. And yes, it's February, and I don't care that I still have cauldron salt and pepper shakers out. They stay out year round. And I love that. And I think that's a lot of what I see on your YouTube videos that I love, is that you're doing your thing, you're doing your normal thing, you're making a bullet journal, you're doing your normal thing, but also witchcraft. And not like, I feel like we get stuck in this, like, everything about your personality has to be witchcraft when it comes to Wicca and witchcraft, and it doesn't have to be that way. I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but these are the thoughts I've been rolling around with for a few weeks now.
No, that makes total sense. And I think it's important for, like, me, for example, who is making videos, to make it known that, yes, I'm a witch, but I'm also a mom. I'm a partner. I run a household. I have a garden. I have work things that I have to do. And I'm not sitting here crafting these spells 24/7. If I'm being 100% honest, that type of spell work happens maybe 3 times a month. Like, you don't have to be doing spells every day to be a witch. You don't have to do a spell a week to be a witch. Once you reach a certain stage, and that sort of like honeymoon phase of discovering witchcraft is over, you realize that you only have to do spells when you need to. Like, rituals are something that I think is separate, because those are more, in my experience, about like honoring the changing of the season, or honoring the moon cycle, if that's something that you do. But yeah, it's part of my life, but it is not my whole life. And I feel like that's a very important distinction to be made.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think that's definitely like a lot of what I've been thinking about in this regard. I think it comes down to when you are the smaller number of this thing, like I don't know how to say this right. It's not a marginalized identity. I'm not sure being pagan or being Wiccan is a marginalized identity, but it kind of rolls in that same realm of being the oddball out, being the smaller portion of something, right? Like, as a lesbian, like, for a really long time, there were a lot of people in my life that saw me as a lesbian first. And I feel like Wicca and witchcraft kind of lends itself the same way, where somebody finds that out, and if they find it odd, if they find it weird, they think of that first. And so it does become your entire identity. And now I'm at a point where I made a TikTok video introducing myself to TikTok, and completely forgot to mention that I was a lesbian until the last like 3 seconds of the video, and I was like, oh, and I'm gay. Like, but it's not my whole identity. It just happens to be, it's not the most interesting thing about me. Same with witchcraft and Wicca. Like, it's not the most interesting thing about me, but I like the idea of seamlessly incorporating it into the mundane in that way, of like this, in the same way that Christians have always felt like they have the right to do that. Christians don't hesitate to ask everybody to pray before a meal. Like they don't look around the room and go, how many Christians are at this table? They just assume that everybody around the table wants to pray, right?
Yes.
Yes. And I feel like there is a power in that maybe we should be embracing and taking on more as pagans, perhaps.
I have thought about this actually, because we just recently joined Girl Scouts, and I, of course, added more to my plate, and I was like, sure, I'll be a troop leader, because I don't have anything better to do. But anyway, we went to this event that was just for the troop leaders in our service unit and their kids, because that doesn't always happen, because at meetings it's like you're the leader, you don't get to be mom, and this was something different. But like half of the service unit is Catholic, and when it came time for us to eat the dinner that we had made, or the lunch that we had made, everybody got in a circle and it was time to say grace. And I was like, okay. And then my daughter, she goes, she's like, I'll say it. And I said, you don't know what that is, first of all. I asked her, I said, do you know what that means to say grace? And she looks at me, she goes, no. She's like,
no, but I'm gonna do it.
I can say grace. Like that's just a word. I'm like, okay. And so I explained to her briefly what it was. And she's like, well, then what do we do, Mom? I said, we can stand here in silence out of respect for everybody else that's going to do it. And the person that decided to lead grace that time was Catholic, but they did like a song for grace that goes to the tune of the Addams Family theme song, because it's for all the kids. So it was cute. But I was thinking how I'm going to do something like that when we have our troop meetings, when we start having our troop meetings, because Girl Scouts has like this framework that you follow. You have an opening ceremony, you do the Pledge of Allegiance, and you do the rest of it. And when you eat, you can say grace, or you can give like a thanks to the earth for the food that we're going to eat or whatever. Like, how can I get away with doing something inconspicuous, not overtly religious, and not make the people angry that are at the troop meeting? Because like the whole point of the troop being together is for the girls to get together and for the parents to be involved, and for everybody to learn all at the same time. I can't go to the troop meeting and say grace and say, thank you, Bridget, for, the bounty and the fertile earth and the gods above and the gods below. And I can't do that.
Right.
But I can create a prayer of thanks and gratitude for the earth in general. Mm-hmm. It's just something that is strange. And I have often thought about how Christianity and the ideas of Christianity are interjected into a lot of our lives daily without us even doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
So like the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. Now, it wasn't like this several years ago, but now when you get the paper from Girl Scouts, it has an asterisk next to the word God, and it has a little note that says, supplement whatever your faith is, it's part of the Girl Scout law to uphold God and country or something like that. Mm-hmm. They've added in space to, there's a word, be respectful of the beliefs of others. But I don't know how practical it would be in a troop setting.
Right. Yeah, it's so hard to like, and I kind of got on this topic because I was watching a YouTube video of a planner, one of the planner queens that I like, and her name's Cindy, and she was reviewing a planner that she had purchased, and nowhere in the purchasing of the planner did it identify itself as a religious planner. it was just supposed to be a planner, and then she got it and there's like a Bible verse on every day of, or on every week of the
that
planner.
would bother.
And she was like, if you're like a Christian planner, you know, that's fine. There's a market for that, but identify yourself as a Christian. Like, don't assume that you're the norm, which is really what you're doing when you assume that everybody believes in praying before eating a meal. You're assuming that your customs are the norm for everybody in the room without checking in, right? And there is a sense of like, I don't know, default American in that bothers me, I guess.
Yeah.
Like the default is under God, right?
Yeah. Well, and even like praying before sports events. Like I get it. If players want to pray, or the participants want to pray, cool. I don't want to pray.
Right.
I just don't. I bring that up because my dad was watching the Daytona 500 yesterday, and it was just a weird thing, because they pray before the race.
Yeah. Yeah, it is weird. It's weird, and it's weird to not be part of the over culture in that way.
Yeah, I always say fringe.
Kind of
like I'm on the fringes, the outside, which I'm okay with. It's been long enough. I'm comfortable out here now.
Out here on the fringe. And you live in a state where you probably are like very fringe.
Yeah, I live in Florida.
For like, yeah, Florida's not, I don't imagine, the most witchy state.
So I'll be honest, I have not been out and about that much because we moved here in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
There is a metaphysical shop, maybe 10, 15 minutes from my house. It's not that far. There are, I know there's another one in the opposite direction. And I think Orlando has like a massive pagan pride event that they have every year.
Oh, cool.
And then there's a really big Facebook group for my area of witchy people.
Right.
But that's about it.
Yeah, I live 2 hours from Salem, Massachusetts. So like you can find witchy things to do where I live.
Yeah.
Any day of the year. Like there is somebody somewhere. There's a car that I see in my neighborhood a lot that has a pentacle that's like 4 feet wide painted on the hood of the car.
Oh my gosh.
And like I live in a town with a few thousand people, and this witchy car lives in my neighborhood, and I have no idea who it belongs to. Awesome. Because there's a lot of witches around here.
That's so awesome. Yeah, like it's so strange to be in Florida because I'm from California, and California is known for, well, in my experience, it's known for its diversity. It's known for being generally accepting of multiple types of people. That's not Florida. That is not what Florida is known for. I mean, right now we have a bill by our government that's the Don't Say Gay law, where you can't talk about LGBT rights in school or in general, because I don't know, Governor DeSantis or whatever doesn't want to indoctrinate children with gender identity. God forbid kids feel comfortable and safe. But I was going somewhere with that.
Florida.
Yes, Florida.
I spent 3 days in Florida. In like 2017, 2018. My hair was so frizzy that I am not built for that humidity. I am New England through and through. And I was there for literally 3 days, and I was like, take me home, get me away from this air. It's too hot, it's too humid, I can't handle it. Take me home.
It is.
And I was in Miami, which Miami is not a place for people like me. Like that's not for me.
Miami is way further south than I am. So you got way more humidity than I have.
Yeah, we actually went as far as Isla Morada. We were down in the Keys for a day, and Miami is like great if you like to shop and go to clubs. I don't like either of those things, so I was really bored in that city.
Yeah, I think I would be bored too. I have yet to go to Miami. I don't I don't know if I want to. I don't like the traffic. I don't like big cities like that, which is funny because I live near Tampa, which is also a massive city, but I'm on like the outskirts. I am in a different town that's not in the city. So it's okay. I do like that I can go to the
How'd
beach.
you end up in Florida? Was it a work thing?
No, so my mom has an autoimmune condition, and before we were in Florida, we lived in Oregon, and the cold was just not doing it for her. She was having trouble walking, and just getting out of bed in the morning was just horrible. And so we were like, okay, we need to get out of here because it's too cold for half the year. You're miserable for 6+ months out of the year. This is not okay. So we were like, okay, nobody wants to go back to California because we just didn't. And we didn't want to move somewhere where we didn't know anyone. So our options were go to North Dakota, where my brother lives, which obviously is way colder than Oregon. So that was not an option.
I was gonna say colder. Yeah.
Or Florida, because my sister had moved here a couple years prior. So we're like, okay, we're going to go to Florida now. So we drove across the country and moved to Florida. And it's been a journey. And it's been an intense ride sometimes.
Yeah. I live in Maine, and I've lived in Maine my whole life. And my heritage and my spiritual practice both is very like British Isles, Ireland, Scotland. I have a Scottish last name. I have a very Scottish, like, half the people in my family are redheads. When we got married, my wife is Native American, and when we got married, one of her best friends was like, I've never seen so many redheads in one place, because she's Native American and from a reservation where everybody has dark brown hair. And she was like, this is the weirdest thing I've never seen. That's my family. My family's very Scots-Irish, redheaded family. And so my spirituality and my paganism has always centered very much on that wheel of the year, the changing of those seasons that I'm so very familiar with. How does that, moving locations like that, how does that play into your paganism and into your spirituality as far as like the seasons and having no seasons? Really?
It's been interesting because I spent most of my life in California. The first time I moved out of California, I was 19 and I moved to Oklahoma. So it was a little different. But going from a place that has 4 regular seasons to Florida, which, if you pay close attention, has 4 seasons, they're just not the same. It has been interesting, confusing, and it's made me feel disconnected sometimes, because like in Oregon, I could tell when we were broaching spring, when we were finally over the threshold from winter into spring, because it was clear, and the crocuses, I think I'm saying that right, they're little flowers that bloom after winter is quote unquote officially over. We had them all over our flower bed in our yard. And it was easier for me to be in tune with the land and the area around me. In Florida, when we first moved here, we lived in a really terrible apartment. It was a horrible experience. And we moved in the middle of summer. So I couldn't really get out to get connected, because where I am during the summer, it rains every day like clockwork in the afternoon, and not just like a drizzle. It pours, thunderstorms, thunder, lightning, like the whole 9 yards every day during the summer. And so my first thought when we first got here, there was a massive storm that night, and I stood at my sliding glass door in my apartment and I was like, this is freaking awesome, because that's my kind of weather. But then I'm like, but I can't go outside. I can't do anything right now. And then not having that connection in the apartment is what really made me feel disconnected, because I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't see what was around me and pay close enough attention because I was worrying about a million other things at that point to figure out when the seasons change, what the seasons are, and, you know, the different signs. Now that we have our own home, we are further away from the city and we have more land around us. Like our yards are fairly big. There's trees everywhere. And I don't have as much on my plate. So I've been able to pay better attention to when the seasons change. And after a full year of being in this house and being able to pay attention, in my area, the seasonal shifts are brought in by fog. It's only ever foggy when the season's about to change.
That's
It was so weird. And I'm just like, that took some getting used to, because where I'm from in California, the fog happened all the time during the winter because we were in a valley and that's just how it was. But here, it's like there would be heavy, dense fog in the morning for several days or even a week. And then it would go away and then the weather would start to change. And then I could see like the trees were blooming, or the trees were losing their leaves, or the cicadas were really noisy, or God forbid the mosquitoes start to come out. But it's taken a while to get that connection back. But it's coming.
That's fascinating. I always joke that, like, if you spend any time in Maine, you realize why Stephen King set all of his novels here, because among other things, fog is a year-round thing, and you never know when you're going to come across it. And you could be driving on a perfectly clear night and all of a sudden go through a patch of fog in the woods in the middle of nowhere, and it is creepy. It's disconcerting. Like, if you don't know this is just Maine and we have fog, it is creepy to just like suddenly drive through unexpected fog on a perfectly clear night.
I think that would give me pause for sure. Like, what is here?
Maine is Maine. I mean, there's a reason we've produced so many horror novelists, I guess.
Your climate's just perfect for it.
It is. It's perfect. And it's a creepy place, and the buildings are really old. And I mean, my house that I live in is 200 years old and was originally built as the undertaker to accompany the church across the street during, like, just before the Civil War. So, like, and that's like, and my house is not that old compared to some in the neighborhood. There are others in the neighborhood that were built in the 1700s. So that's just, it's Maine. We're creepy. It's great. I love it. It fits me. I feel like I had another question I was going to ask you, but then I got distracted by the fog thought that was based on something you were just saying. I definitely think that's interesting, though, the way that you kind of have developed an understanding of the seasons. I feel like when we went to Florida a few years ago, it was a road trip, and it was the beginning of March. So we left Maine in winter, got to Florida and the Isla Mirada, and we were like swimming in a pool, and then drove back through. So it was like you could see all the seasons, like in the DC area. It was like spring. And like we kind of saw all 4 seasons in 1 week road trip, which was really interesting.
Yeah, I posted a picture in my Discord server yesterday because I was working out my garden and I was planting onions and my cabbage is growing great. And someone else was like, it's so strange to see plants growing in the ground because out here everything is still covered in frost. And I'm like, it's because I live in Florida and my growing season is backwards because of all the rain during the summer. Some stuff won't survive if you plant it in the ground because it will drown. Too much water. So a lot of the planting that we do for our food that I grow starts in fall and goes through winter, which is backwards compared to everywhere else. You don't want to grow things during the winter, but here sometimes I have to. And you made a comment about swimming during March. It's February and it's in the 80s. Like, I might go swimming later today.
That's so wild to me. It's actually really nice today. It's 45 degrees. So I didn't wear a coat. It's supposed to be up to 60 degrees, I think, on Thursday, but then Friday we're going to get 6 inches of snow.
Oh, goodness. So, I don't miss the snow.
It's very much still winter here.
I don't miss the snow.
I am learning about myself over the last 2 years. I think the pandemic has taught us all a lot about ourselves. And one of the things that I have learned about myself is just how tight my connection to this state and this land is, these weather patterns and these trees and these woods and like, this is what I know and this is what I've known my whole life. And I think I, for a long time, felt like I was supposed to want to go somewhere else or do something else. And I've only ever lived in Maine. I haven't moved around like you have. I've traveled, but I've only ever lived in Maine. And this pandemic has taught me that I think I'm okay with that. And that even when I get mad because the cold hurts my face, this is still where I belong.
Yeah, the only places that I've ever felt the connection to was when we lived in Oregon. And I think that's just because where we lived, we were way outside the city. I had a view of like the mountains outside, and I was able to spend more time with the land and the connection that I'm growing here in Florida. I don't know if I've ever felt like one place was home, which is weird. I'm that kind of person that I have been at home before and gotten that weird feeling in my gut of being homesick. I'm like, but I'm at home. So it's like, what am I homesick for? It's just a very strange experience.
Yeah. I was born in Portland, Maine, and I've lived in almost every corner of this state. I've kind of been all over the state, and I don't have a hometown so much. The town that I graduated high school in, I only lived in for 5 years. So like the one that you would consider your hometown, right? Where you went to high school, a lot of people for that is their hometown. For me, that is like a small fraction of my life. And it's really interesting to not have a specific like singular location. But Maine itself is definitely like, I'm a Mainer.
You've got a home state, not a hometown.
Yeah, I have a home state. Yeah, that works for me. What are you working on? What do you have coming up next? Either in your podcasting, your YouTubing, your all of your things, your crafting.
Ooh, okay. So today I actually sat here and recorded a video and a podcast. I don't generally do them on the same topic to be like the same thing, but this one is, because it is important and I want it in both places so more people can hear it. I had asked on my social media for questions about mental illness and witchcraft. Either like, do you have questions for me personally because I have mental illness? Questions in general if somebody else does. So I sat here and I recorded for almost an hour and a half answering all of these questions that I got, and like giving my own personal interjections and stuff, because I have major depressive disorder and anxiety and PTSD and a history of trauma and all this other stuff. And it very much plays into my personal practice, both as a witch and a pagan. So that's what's coming next. Beyond that, I couldn't tell you.
I feel like I saw something this morning saying, whenever you encounter another human in this world, in the modern world, you have to assume that that human is recovering from trauma. Yes. And I was like, that is so, like, I feel like, especially with the pandemic and everything going on with that, and then prior to that, we had like the whole last presidential administration was traumatic for a lot of people, especially marginalized people. And I would be hard pressed to find somebody in my life who's not in one way or another recovering from trauma or dealing with some sort of PTSD or some sort of whatever. Like, so I love that you're looking at how those topics go together, because so many people's answers to mental health issues are meditation, spirituality, religion. And yeah, I think that's an important thing to explore. I like that you're doing that. I saw your posts about that too. I didn't have any questions for you, but
no, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, it's like,
I probably have questions, but I'm bad at going back and answering such things.
It's one thing that I'm very passionate about, because even outside of witchcraft and spirituality, it's who I am. Like, it's part of my life. I have had those mental breakdowns where I'm like laying on the floor and I won't get too much into it, but you know, it's part of who I am, and it very much plays a role in my daily life, which also means that it plays a role in my witchcraft and paganism. And I feel like there are 2, maybe 3 categories of spiritual people. You've got the people like me who are like, yes, witchcraft, yes, paganism, but also yes, therapy, yes, medication, yes, take care of your mental health. Then you've got the people that are on the other side who are like, medicine is a modern tragedy and it's like low vibe and you shouldn't take medication and you just need to go for a walk outside and meditate and you'll be all good. And then you've got some people who are kind of in the middle who are like, yes, therapy, but no medication, take herbs instead. And there's issues with a lot of it. And I don't necessarily see it talked about in depth as much as I would like, because it makes people uncomfortable. I get that it makes people uncomfortable to talk about depression and everything that comes along with it, especially for people that have never experienced it. But it's those people that need to listen.
Yeah.
And it's something I will talk about until the day I die.
Yeah. I feel like the pandemic pushed me toward modern medicine more. My frustration with anti-vaxxers, I think, pushed me toward modern medicine in a way that, like, prior to the pandemic, I would, I wouldn't have hesitated to take a medication that I need or anything like that. But I was far more likely to look for a natural remedy for something. And the last 2 years, I've just gotten so frustrated that I'm just like, just throw some Valium at it.
Yeah.
Like there has to be a pill for this. Yeah. Right. There's a pill to fix this problem. Yeah. Right.
It's one of those things that's like, I have done all 3. I have been unmedicated. I have been on herbal supplements and quote unquote natural remedies. And then I have been medicated. And at each point in time, that decision was right for me. We have a lot of people, I usually encounter it in New Age communities, that say all medication is bad. Only take herbal supplements and natural remedies, or don't take medication at all. And I'm like, would you tell someone with type 1 diabetes not to take their insulin because they will die?
Right.
Like,
right.
It's a life-saving medication. It's this whole thing.
And there's this chronic issue in our culture that I talk about a lot. I've talked about it a lot on a couple of other episodes. There's this chronic issue in our culture where we try to treat the brain as though it's different from the rest of the body. It's a separate organ somehow. And for some reason, everything else in the body, it's okay to treat with medication, but the brain, somehow we're supposed to magically like, oh, it's all in their head. Well, everything is all in your head. Of course it's in your head. Like literally every pain you experience, you're experiencing through your brain.
Of course it's in your head. It's where your brain lives.
Yeah, that's how the nervous system works. Like, yes, it's all in your head. Everything is all in your head. And I definitely I feel like there's that combined with this kind of sense of my way is the only way or my way is the right way. Believe my dogma, damn it. That kind of creates a lot of holier than thou pagans that
it's an issue. It's an issue.
Yeah. And it goes with dietary issues. There's a million different topics you could have the exact same conversation about, this is the only diet that ever is going to make anybody lose weight. Well, okay, but my physiology is very different being a Scots-Irish British woman than my wife's physiology as a Native American Irish woman, right? Like those two different things are going to be very different. Our bodies process different ingredients different ways. I can eat bread all day long and never have an issue, and she can't. So because the Native American digestive system was not built around the same kind of grains that my Scots-Irish digestive system was built around. So yeah, we tend to think that our way is the only way. And perhaps that's not productive. Perhaps that's not the most productive path.
Who would have thought?
Right. What else before we close, is there anything else you would like to discuss that we haven't brought up? Anything you are dying to talk about, upcoming projects, or any connections you want to make about the topics of spirituality, creativity, or whatever else?
I think the only thing that I would say is that a lot of people, in my experience that I have talked to, hesitate to incorporate their crafty stuff into their practice because they don't know how, or they question the quote unquote validity of incorporating their craft into their craft. And to those people, I would say just freaking do it. Just do it. If you want to create a blanket for, I don't know, to help you ground, get a pattern or make one up and get you some grounding colors and sit in silence or sit in a place that's comfortable that reminds you of that feeling, and come up with a little chant if you want to do while you're stitching or while you're making it in whatever way, and do it. That is just as valid a form of magic as sitting down, dressing a candle with herbs and oils and lighting it. Magic doesn't have to be difficult, and you can incorporate probably just about any type of art form into whatever witchcraft practice you've got. Just do it.
Yeah. How are you incorporating bullet journaling into your spirituality?
Right now I am using it to keep track of like divination and the moon phases. And I am trying to keep the months on like a color scheme for something that I want that month, or that I just feel like I need to embody that month. So like February, I used pinks and reds and whatnot because it's February, Valentine's Day, there's love magic, but I also incorporated like springtime colors because of Imbolc at the beginning of February. Very, very basic stuff right now because I've only been bullet journaling since October. So it's only been what I can count. Is that 5 months? Something like that.
Something like that. Sure. I believe you.
Yeah, it's definitely helping me keep track of more of the spiritual aspects of things. But it's also helping with my focus, which in turn plays back into witchcraft, because if I can focus while I'm doing a bullet journal, I can focus while I need to focus while I'm doing a spell.
I am incorporating an actual monthly theme for the first time into my bullet journal this month for the month of March. I've done like a weekly theme. I just kind of changed my mind each week. I had like a week that was Doctor Who themed. I had a week that was Daria themed. I had a week that was green shamrocks, whatever. But I actually decided to do a monthly theme for the month of March, and I've created a video about it that I'm going to be editing this afternoon, and I'll probably have up next week or so. And I did a theme of Portland, Maine. I took some photos that I had taken in and around the city that I found particularly inspiring. I chose colors based on the photos, and I've got like little lobster buoys, and I've got the posts that come up out of the ground all over Commercial Street, downtown Portland, and that kind of thing. Cool. Incorporated into my bullet journal theme for the first time. So
that's so awesome.
I think it's going to be really fun to have a theme. My big drive was I'm not working entirely at home, which means I don't have all of my supplies with me. So if I do a theme, I can just pick the markers and the washi tapes or whatever that fit that theme and just carry those with me.
That's true.
So hopefully that'll work out. But the one thing that I found with my spirituality and bullet journaling that's made a huge difference is setting reminders for myself a few weeks before a Sabbath. Because I am notorious for like the day of or the day after going, oh, right, yesterday was Imbolc. Yeah. Whoops. And having a bullet journal, I can remind myself 2 weeks ahead of time, start planning for your Imbolc ritual. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. That's I should probably do that. Set it out like that. Like I have a future log where I put all of the dates that I'm going to need to add for months and months in the future. But I only ever look at it when I'm doing a new week.
Right.
So I could probably
that's what made
incorporate
the
it
difference
more.
for me was I started putting it into my future log. Like I started putting halfway through January, I had start preparing for Imbolc in my future log, which like for the first time in years, I actually remembered it before it was over. This has been lovely. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but this has been lovely. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so glad I got to have this conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun.
I knew that we would have a lot to talk about because we have so much in common. So I was like, yes. And you actually like somehow having your Discord server reminds me to check Discord. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Otherwise, like I completely missed my D&D games and everything because I forget to check Discord. But you post interesting things, so I remember to check Discord. So
thank you.
Tell everybody where to find you, and of course I'll add the links into the show notes as well.
So I'm pretty sure you can get to everything if you go to my website, roundthecauldron.com. There was an issue several months ago where my hosting decided to update something and it completely broke my entire site. So I had to redo it from scratch. And yeah, so that was fun. So hopefully all the links are there, but I am Round the Cauldron pretty much everywhere. So on Instagram, it's Round the Cauldron, round_the_cauldron. Twitter is Round the Cauldron without the D on round because Twitter is weird and the name was too long. I have a Facebook page, but I don't post there anymore. So, I mean, if you want to follow it, you can. It's just not active anymore. YouTube is youtube.com/roundthecauldron. I have a shop.roundthecauldron.com. I have a couple crochet patterns, but the main thing that I do is sell crochet stuff like goddess dolls. I have some altar cloths. I have some veils for anybody that veils, all kinds of things. Where else am I? I have my Discord server. I don't have a link for that. That's just somewhere. The links for Discord are really weird. So it's like
Discord is a weird place to me. Discord makes me feel like I'm going back in time.
Yeah, because it's like a chat room.
I'm like, oh, this is what the internet was in 1999.
Yeah, exactly. But it's fun. It's fun. Usually it's fun.
It is. It is. I like Discord when I remember to go on there, but I feel like I'm going back in time and I feel like I don't know who the hell anyone is. Like I'm one of the strange people that actually has my own face on my Discord. Most people have like something else. Yeah. And so I don't know who anybody is ever. And then like, I'll be talking to somebody and be like, oh, you're so-and-so. Oh, I actually do know who you are. I just didn't realize because your name is something really weird. It's like going back to the ICQ days and like way back pre-MySpace. It's weird.
That is way back. I don't know what that is. I know MySpace, but I don't know what ICQ is.
Way back 1998 1999, that's where we were hanging out. Thank you so much for listening to Stitch and Witch podcast. Our intro and outro music are from the song Turner's Rebellion by Trisha Mori, and you can find that link in the show notes. If you want to support the show, you can join us over on Patreon at patreon.com/K-Ray-Saulis. All the show notes can be found at stitchandwitch.com, as well as links to my Etsy shop, YouTube channel, and details about everything else I'm up to. Please feel free to tag the show in all of your creative ventures over on Instagram at stitchandwitchpod, and you can email the show at stitchandwitchpod@gmail.com. I'm your host, Katrina Ray-Saulis. Now go make something fun.